for all of these sessions, we are trying to record some opening remarks. So I will do that for the purpose of the recorded session. But would you mind introducing yourself to me first? Tell me a little bit about yourself.
Yes, sure. So basically, I am in information technology. I'm doing research in artificial intelligence. So basically, I am a professor right now at the University of Hong Kong. So before I moved back to Hong Kong, I was a professor at the University of Southern California. And before that, I got my PhD from MIT.
Oh, that's awesome.
Basically, I've been working on using AI technologies to solve important societal problems. You see my background, AI for social good.
Sure, I like that. I like that.
So the idea is to try to use AI technologies to solve problems that are important to society. For example, one project that we are working on right now is to use AI technology to estimate air pollution and to study the relationship between air pollution and health of subjects like asthma patients.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, and so for this particular session, I'm interested in finding out, of course, how to use AI, and apply it to medical problems.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, you and I can talk about that in a little bit more detail, and then we'll see who else comes in. Okay, but sure. So Catherine, I'm going to go ahead and just say the opening remarks so that we'll have a record of them.
Sure.
Sure. Okay, so good morning and welcome to our breakout session for data and computer science, health technology, and engineering. I'm Gilda Barabino, president of Olin College of Engineering and professor of biomedical and chemical engineering. I've had a career as an educator and researcher, and before joining Olin, I held positions at Northeastern University, Georgia Tech, Emory, and the City College of New York. My own research interests broadly apply engineering principles to solve problems in medicine, and more specifically are focused on cellular and tissue responses to mechanical forces and environmental cues in the context of sickle cell disease and orthopedic tissue engineering. Our goal is to develop novel therapeutic strategies to improve the health of individuals living with sickle cell disease and those suffering from diseases associated with damaged cartilage and bone. Most recently, using a transgenic sickle cell mouse model to examine bone abnormalities in sickle cell disease, we were able to demonstrate structural differences between normal and sickle based on age and sex. Sickle bone was more fragile than normal, and sickle male bone was more diminished than female. In the area of cartilage tissue engineering, we examined the interplay between hydrodynamic forces and biochemical cues in the regeneration of articular cartilage to enhance the development of robust and clinically relevant substitute tissues. The incorporation and delivery of growth factors under various conditions, for example, have important implications for tissue regeneration. I'd also like to draw your attention to educational projects and courses at Olin that address health and longevity. And one of our signature courses, User-Oriented Collaborative Design, our focus is on user-oriented collaborative approaches to design and seek holistic solutions, integrating user and functional perspectives. Another one of our signature courses, Engineering for Humanity, is led by an anthropologist and is focused on design for aging. Student teams work directly with older adults to understand their specific needs and to design adaptable, implementable solutions. They address aging in society and employ empathetic and ethnographic methods in combination with a technical understanding of the problem. We found that broadening our definition of what counts as engineering and who are engineers provides wide openings for broad, novel, creative solutions from those seeking to enhance the length and quality of life. Understanding needs and designs for those needs by a range of individuals and being more centered on the user will lead to an explosion of strategies and approaches for the benefit of society. So with that, I'd like to engage those who are with us in further discussion. So thank you. And so Victor, I'd like to hear a
Okay.
little bit more. You know, you were talking about using AI. We are interested in some of those types of approaches as well, particularly environmental approaches and looking at issues around environmental justice. So could you tell me a little bit more about like some of the specific questions you might have?
Yes. So basically what happened is in most major cities in the world, there are air quality monitoring stations.
Mm-hmm.
They are government deployed, and usually they will measure the pollutants like PM 2.5, PM 10, NO2 and things like that. Unfortunately, in most cities, these stations are very sparse. For example, in the whole of Hong Kong, there are only 18 stations. So what that means is you really wouldn't know what the air quality is around you. So the question then becomes, how do you overcome this problem? So the brute force solution, of course, is to say, well, why don't I deploy an air quality station at every street intersection? And that won't work because it's very costly. Usually these things cost a few $1 million. And they also cost like a couple million to maintain every year. And especially in a place like Hong Kong, where land is so expensive, even if you can afford to buy the air quality equipment, you cannot afford to buy the piece of land that it sits on.
Sure.
So it won't work that way. And then we ask ourselves, okay, are there other ways to overcome this problem? And one way, of course, is to say, well, why don't I deploy it on mobile platforms? So I would have the equipment deployed on a truck, or if you have a small one, like a portable one, you can deploy it on a car, and then as you drive around the city, then you would have more complete coverage with a smaller number of stations. Unfortunately, if you do that, then you will not have continuous coverage because your car may be passing a particular point maybe once every couple of hours.
Mm-hmm.
Then we ask ourselves, okay, are there alternatives? And then the alternative we came up with is to use proxy data. The idea is we think about what are the things that influence air pollution. And this would be things like vehicular traffic, congestion, the urban morphology, where the tall buildings are, you know, the urban canyon effect, wind direction, wind speed, humidity, temperature. Unfortunately, those data are actually readily available. So what you do is you take those data and you train up a deep learning model. And once the model is trained, then for those locations without government air quality monitors, you can actually then use this data as proxy and then estimate what the air quality is going to be. And what we have been able to do is to actually get air quality down to the 100 meter by 100 meter grid. So instead of 18 air quality stations in Hong Kong, now we can have 100,000 air quality virtual stations. And so this solves a lot of problems and allow us to study important issues like, for example, are the poorer people exposed to worse air pollution? What do you think?
The poor people are exposed to the worst. The poorer they are, the more they're exposed.
Yes, so most people would agree with that. And most people use qualitative arguments, things like, well, the poor people, they cannot afford to live wherever they like, so they ended up living next to the railroad tracks and next to the freeways, and therefore they breathe worse air. It's easy for you to say that, but how do you prove it?
Right.
Now, in the past, you cannot, because as I said, there are only 18 air quality stations in Hong Kong. And so one air quality station sort of cover a relatively large region. And there may be actually poor and rich people living not so far apart. So you cannot really tell. So the only way you can tell is if you have more fine-grained air quality data.
Mm-hmm.
So because now we can have more fine-grained air quality data, then we can actually map the more fine-grained air quality data with the fine-grained census data. And in Hong Kong, they have census and they collect information on average family income, education level, whether you are a professional worker and things like that. And in Hong Kong, we have this election districts. So we have like 442 election districts. And for these 442 election districts, we can calculate something called the social deprivation index, which depends on the average family income and education level. And then because we have fine-grained air quality, we can actually also estimate for these 442 election districts what the average air quality is. Let's say the PM 2.5 we are using. And then we can prove in a statistically significant manner that in fact, the poorer people in Hong Kong are subjected to worse air quality. So we published a paper a couple of years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that was an interesting paper. And of course, then the next question then is, okay, given that you know where the poor air quality is, then what do you do about it?
Sure.
And then, of course, we try to lobby the government. And there are things like you can have, for example, pedestrianization. You can have some of the roads, you just say block it off and make it into pedestrian-only areas, because a lot of air pollution is basically formed by cars and stuff. And in overseas, actually, they actually have program whereby the government will come up with some kind of funds which can be used to try to improve the quality of life of the people that live in these poor air quality areas.
Well, I can tell you that what you're talking about, there's lots of interest in lots of major cities in the United States as well. And I think combining the data that we're getting from the different cities will certainly help, because I think we'll see the same trends regardless of the city, regardless of where the city is. You'll see the same kind of trend in the poor areas. I noticed we have one other person who seems to have joined us. Eric.
Hello.
Hi, Eric. Well, I'm Gilda Barabino, and I'm serving as our moderator, and Victor is also with us. We were talking about using AI for pollution, and we have had the benefit of introducing ourselves to one another. We'd also like to hear from you, like who are, where are you at?
Very nice to meet you. I'm a cardiologist. I'm actually on call in a hospital.
Oh, how awesome.
In Hong Kong.
Thanks for dropping in. We really appreciate that. So what's
Eric,
one of the major issues for you as you think about health and longevity?
Well, sorry that I missed most of your the presentation, and may I ask where everyone is from?
Okay, I'm from Hong Kong, you.
Oh, I see. Nice to meet you, Victor. COHK, I'm in Hong Kong as well.
Okay.
Oh my goodness, how about that? That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Well, we have similar issues regardless of where we are. So,
yeah.
So Eric, I was just saying, I'm a president of Olin College of Engineering, but I'm also a professor of biomedical and chemical engineering. And
very nice to meet you.
Same here. And a lot of my work has been around cardiovascular research, like applying engineering principles to better understand problems with blood flow and that type of thing.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, so I'm always interested in how we do use engineering and technology for these health problems.
Yeah.
Because there's so much to be gained. So one of the points I was trying to make earlier too is to be user-centered. So like if we user-centered, patient-centered, if we understand the populations that we're actually trying to serve and involve them in forming solutions to those problems, I think it makes a lot, well, it makes for better solutions, let's put it that way.
Yeah, I think we're on the cusp of, well, the entire world, on the cusp of basically benefiting from computational sciences and, technology. I think within a few years, it's going to be very different.
I think so. And it's evolving so rapidly. I find like even in engineering, having a hard time keeping up with the technology, with the tools, and how to use the tools appropriately.
Yeah, I read somewhere that medical information is doubling every 73 days. That's pretty scary.
Yeah, right.
So
So
Eric,
you're-
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Victor.
Yeah. So Eric, what is your research area?
I work with patients with heart failure, and of course, over 90% of them are aged 65 or above. And you know, I've collected a lot of digital data on blood glucose levels and in electrocardiography, and we've been working with computer scientists here, and it's a huge challenge because you can imagine these wearables, these on-body devices that we put on patients for, I don't know, 7 to 14 days. There's also a lot of noise, so trying to understand how blood glucose might influence heart rhythm and other problems. It's been a big headache for me.
I can just see
But I
that.
think I think we see some trends in some patients, but we don't in others, and so we're trying to figure out if all that signal means anything. But
Yeah. So
that's what attracted me to this forum.
Yeah, I worked on big data and artificial intelligence, and
I see.
And I'm aware of the fact that although big data can actually allow you to see trends and maybe able to get some information out of it, in most cases, the data are very noisy, and there's a lot of data that is missing. And then the normal method of just saying, okay, well, let me just interpolate. Usually that doesn't work. So of course, there are of course research on how to recover missing data. If you are able to exploit some domain knowledge as to the underlying cause of why the data is missing or why the data is noisy, then you can try to be more intelligent in terms of recovering the data.
So if I may ask Victor and Gilda, where do you think what do you think is the role of AI in sort of sorting out real signal from noise and from artifacts? I mean, if you could.
I'll answer quickly and then let Victor speak because he has more expertise in it than I do. But I think one of the problems we have is it could be very helpful if we have broad perspectives in putting together the approaches, because there are biases that happen. And then we miss things because we don't take a broad enough approach, and we don't bring enough people into setting up the algorithms in the first place. So the biases, if we could deal with the biases, I think we do better. Could you respond to that too, Victor?
Well, that's obviously a very important part of the problem. And so we have this saying, right? Garbage in, garbage out. So if you collect the data, and if you don't collect the data properly, then obviously you're going to be biased. Okay. But I guess even in existing traditional non-AI type of medical research, you have to be very careful as to how you recruit subjects. So obviously some of the things that you need to watch out for, you need to do that. Now there are of course two schools of thoughts. There are people who think that, well, if I have enough data, then I don't need to have any knowledge. So there is especially there's an argument in machine translation. So in machine translation, basically you have machines that translate, let's say, from English to French or vice versa. And then there are people who say, well, if I have enough matching sentence pairs, then obviously, if I put it into the deep learning model, then after I train it, the model will be able to see all kinds of patterns. So it is not necessary for you to put in domain knowledge in linguistics, like the language structure, like the syntax and things like that. Okay. In fact, there's a famous saying by an IBM researcher who said, every time I fire a linguist, my model improves in terms of translation accuracy. Now, I personally do not agree with that. Okay. So because my personal belief that if you just flood the system with data, this is like the brute force approach. And sooner or later, you run out of computational storage and computational power. After all, not every one of us is Google, with all these machines available. So it's always, especially from an academic point of view, good to be able to have more efficient algorithms. And how can you get more efficient algorithms is by using the domain knowledge. You want to use the domain knowledge that, the subject will come, and then you have the object, and then you have the rest of the sentence, right? So I think that will always be able to improve in terms of the accuracy. For example, in some of our recent work, we look at different biomarkers for Alzheimer's disease, and then in searching for these biomarkers, then we try to look at whether we can improve the accuracy by putting in the pathways, like the AD pathways. So of course, we are not experts in AD or Alzheimer's disease. So fortunately, we have people who are. And then these medical professors, they will just then tell us, well, Victor, these are important and you should try to code it into your AI model. And that's what we have been trying to do. So this is an example of, I guess, truly interdisciplinary work. And I guess, Gilda, also, I guess I can also characterize you as someone who's doing interdisciplinary research. Is that right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Now,
so, being trained as an engineer working on medical problems, I have no choice but to collaborate with clinicians and other basic scientists. So it's been helpful. I want to make sure we introduce Kimber. Am I saying your name right?
Yes, Kimber Bogard. This is my day 3 working at the National Academy of Medicine. I'm the Deputy Executive Officer for Programs. So I want to say hello. So
hello.
I'm
hello.
learning a
Hello.
lot and bouncing around a lot. Hello, this is fascinating discussion. So thank you. Thank you for acknowledging that.
Yeah, so we're engrossed, as you can tell. And it turns out we have so many things in common in terms of research and background. And Victor and Eric are both in Hong Kong, right?
Yeah.
Yes. Right.
Great. And where are you
So
zooming
I'm
in
at
from?
Olin College of Engineering in Needham, Massachusetts.
Great.
And it's been really exciting having this opportunity to moderate this session and hear from those who are using technology in different ways. But we do have some commonalities, even in our different areas. Victor, particularly with some artificial intelligence, and Eric is working, he's a cardiologist and is using technology in his area. So Eric and Victor, do you want to introduce yourselves to Kimber?
Sure, yeah. So I am a professor in the Department of Electrical and Electronic Engineering at the University of Hong Kong. And my research area is in big data and artificial intelligence. And in particular, I try to apply AI techniques for social good. So I want to apply AI techniques to solve what we consider important societal problems. And in my team, I have people who are medical scientists, who are neurologists, and who are environmental managers. That's actually the first problem we looked at was to look at how to estimate air pollution, and then look at the relationship between air pollution and social deprivation, which I shared with Gilda earlier. So before I moved to the University of Hong Kong, I was a professor at the University of Southern California in Los Angeles. And before that, I was undergrad and PhD student at MIT. So my life's very simple. Basically spend time in 3 different places.
Awesome. How about you, Eric?
I'm a cardiologist in Hong Kong. My research area is heart failure, frailty, and the elderly mostly. We've been using digital devices to study longitudinal. Well, basically, we've been trying to better understand these frail older adults, diabetics, who on whom we place these devices to measure various things, and we've been trying to use that information to predict outcomes. So yeah, and currently I'm on call. So that's why I'm in Swaps.
So what
Very
kind
nice
of
to meet everyone.
devices are you using to monitor the patient?
So we use these patches, these 14-day, 7 to 14-day devices. One of them is electrocardiography. The others these continuous glucose monitors. So
I see.
so we get continuous signals, and we're trying to see if, in particular, whether during sleep, sometimes these diabetics may have very, very low levels of blood glucose, and some may develop very severe hypoglycemia, and some may even have arrhythmias and other problems. So we're just trying to see, trying to better understand that.
So the patches, are they non-invasive?
The ECG one is non-invasive. The one for blood glucose, actually, it's interstitial glucose. There's a very, very fine gold-plated electrode that implants into soft tissue.
I see.
Patient doesn't even feel it. It's a device made by Medtronic. But that industry, we started the project in 2018, and since then the industry's moved on to more what they call flash monitors. So patients would just check anytime they want. So I don't know why they're moving away from the continuous monitors. Maybe for patients, but for researchers, we want the continuous, data. So
Sure.
yeah. Anyway, those are the two, two devices. But there are other people who are doing, not here, but I know, in the field, measuring activity, actigraph and all sorts of stuff. And so, like you said earlier, I think it's important to know the the reasoning and to have other inputs to make sense of the data. It's important. I think it's a lot of noise.
Well, one of the other things that Victor and I had talked about early on was like the role of low socioeconomic factors. Like, so I always wonder too, like, even when we have the technology, who has access to it and how that's influencing outcomes, the health outcomes. And so do you get to look at any of that when you're dealing with the patients, like any differential outcomes based on socioeconomic status?
We've actually collected that data, socioeconomic status, housing, what type of house, whether, it's public housing, whether it's privately owned, and et cetera, and income. But we haven't had a chance to go back and look at. Yeah, we've got several hundred patients. They're all older adults with chronic diabetes, and they all happen to be injecting insulin. So they're, a particular group. Yeah, they're specific. They may not necessarily be the sickest or the most frail, because you could imagine people with unstable or badly controlled diabetes, they may have died earlier on. But so these are, when we recruited them, they had to be at least 70 years of age.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, but we've looked at the other cardiac changes. There are obviously significant changes associated with the disease, but we haven't yet looked at socioeconomic status. That's interesting. Yeah.
do you collect lifestyle data, like do they exercise and diet and stuff like that?
Yeah, we also did the PACE questionnaire, PASE, physical activity for the elderly. I think some of these questionnaires can be difficult to, well, they require self-reporting, accurate self-reporting, and we found that the cognitive cognitive function in the majority of these patients aren't very high. So we use the Montreal Cognitive Assessment Scale, the MoCA, and the average score was around 20, 21 or 2 out of 30. So that's another area of study that we should probably consider, because probably they have, diabetics are known to have neurocognitive issues as well.
Yeah, it's a major risk factor for Alzheimer's disease. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So Victor, because you have looked at different things and some of the parameters around pollution in poor communities, you do have some sense of the socioeconomic background. Is that right?
Yes, so like I said earlier, we try to answer the question, are the poorer people exposed to worse air quality? And at least for Hong Kong, the answer is in the positive, is affirmative, and is a statistically significant answer. So we prove in a statistically significant way that at least in Hong Kong, the poorer people are exposed to worse air. Now you talk to the real estate developers, they don't like it very much when you tell them, hey, I know what air quality is in all your developments, because they would not be able to sell their flats if we publicize that. So they don't like us very much. Yeah. And also we have actually developed an app right now, which you can download from Google Play Store or from Apple Store. And this app, which we call UME Air, air quality for you and me. So this UME Air app, you can actually download it for free, and you can know what is the air quality around you at any point in time. You just flip to our app, and then you can also get the best route to travel from point A to point B, just like in Google Map. The only difference is in Google Map, they will give you different travel times. In addition to travel times, we also give you the expected air pollution exposure.
Sure.
So what that means is you can actually decide whether you want to go a longer route, but then you will be exposed to less air pollution. So yeah, and then also we also have a medical version of it, which is for asthma subjects. And then we know that if this guy is walking into an area high air pollution, then we will give them advice. Now, supposedly we cannot give medical advice because we're not doctors, but what we would say is we go around it by saying, hey, you're walking into an area of high air pollution, you should follow your medical doctor's advice.
Right.
Perhaps you need to do a couple of puffs on your inhaler. Yeah, things like that, yeah.
So I was saying earlier, like as engineers, we're very much about being user-centered and the design being for the users. I wonder sometimes about, say, sensors, for example, and they're only good if people actually use them. Like so,
Yes.
and I also wonder if on the medical front, oftentimes, so like with compliance, back to people using it, we'll come up with designs like, well, let's have an injection that goes over time so that the person doesn't have to remember to take a pill. And so I'm just wondering, like, are some of these strategies of using technology that way, are they really needed? Are they really that helpful? Like, we can't get compliance otherwise. I'm just wondering about how we use technology. And I thought you might have some sense of that, Eric, since you're actually a clinician seeing patients.
So about compliance, I think a few years ago I came across, I forget the name of the company and the researchers working on that. I think they actually had a startup. I think there are these nanoparticles in the pills where, you know, after they ingest the pill that contains the active medical ingredient, that it might be based on MEMS technology, you know, then they can use the cell phone to track. So I guess that can track compliance, but
Right.
but if the user or the patient you know, couldn't ingest it or swallow it anyway, I think you know,
Right.
there's no point. But yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, the pill has some nanoparticles. So after
Yeah.
they ingested it, then what happened?
Whoever it is with the app can trace it until I guess it's removed from the
Pass out of
body.
the body. I
Yeah.
see.
It's based on MEMS, and you know, obviously there's no battery, nothing, but I think that maybe you do need something to interrogate it, probably.
Sure. Because it just shows like all the technology in the world, it's only going to be useful if somebody actually uses it and uses it in the right way, which was one of the points Victor was trying to make earlier as well.
Actually, in my project, so one of the things we need to do is we ask for the subject to fill in questionnaire from time to time. And then what happened is, you know, sometimes we realize that they do not fill in the questionnaire, or they do not power up the devices that we gave them. So we have to send them alerts. So we send them alerts and we say, hey, you know, please fill in this questionnaire, or hey, how come your device is not sending me any data? You know, are you sure you have it charged up properly and things like that? So in the past, what we have done is we found out about the problem and then we have someone call them, but that's just too troublesome when you have a lot of subjects. So what we're doing right now is we're setting up an automated alert system, so that anytime, you know, the data is not coming in properly, then we will sort of send reminders and say fill in the forms and things like that. But even then, sometimes they just don't do it. So.
Well, I have to tell you, this has been an exciting discussion for me. I really enjoyed our having some time together. And actually, it's nice that it was small because we got to go into detail and really get to know one another. We have like a minute left. So I definitely want to encourage us to keep the kinds of work that we're doing and sharing because it's really good. I just found that the commonality that we had was great. And now I have 2 new friends in Hong Kong. So
well, we look forward to welcoming you to Hong Kong when they open up.
yeah, I would love that. Absolutely. You know, we are in fields where it's very important for us to cross these disciplines and work together and use technology in new and different ways.
Yeah.
So now we are at time. So I'm going to thank all of you for being with us and really hope to see you again sometime.
Yeah, thank
So
you.
thanks so much,
Yeah.
everyone.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank
Okay.
you.
You all take
Okay.
care. Stay safe.
Thanks.
Bye.
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 Bye.